And I think, Kyle, you can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Janelle, for hooking us up and making this possible under the circumstances. So I'm Kyle, and you'll hear from Josh too in a moment. I'm here ostensibly for Voters First Wisconsin, and Josh is for Veterans for Political Innovation. So we're technically parts of two different groups that are both supporting the same legislation. And we're going to kind of be talking about from two different standpoints. First, if you're curious who I am, I grew up in Paducah, Kentucky. I'm now a game developer up in Madison. I'm here with my wife while she's getting her PhD at UW-Madison. And I got super interested in election reform for some reason during the pandemic. If you're like me, everyone got some weird hobbies being cooped up for so long. And for whatever reason, this was mine. So here I am. So Bill, when I was talking to Bill on the phone, he was very curious, like what personally got me involved in this topic. And I'm pretty sure it goes back to the first election I actually ever voted in, and this reveals my age, which was the Kentucky State Senate 2nd District in 2006. We had an independent candidate, the only independent incumbent in the Kentucky State Legislature, Bob Leeper, who is very popular, very pragmatist, and my tennis coach's brother. And he was running against Carol Hubbard, a convicted felon who had just gotten out of prison, and Neil Archer, a nobody Republican who was on the school board. Because both the major parties really did not like Bob Leeper being an independent, and they were willing to spend a ton of money to take him down. So I obviously had some preferences in this election. We really liked Bob, like a lot of people locally did, and we really disliked Carol, again, convicted felon for embezzling money from the government. But there's a fundamental dilemma here. Do we vote our conscience, which is to say Bob, who doesn't have much money and isn't putting up nearly the campaign fight as the other two, even though he's the incumbent? Or do we vote to compromise and just vote for the major party one who isn't a convicted felon? And this is a really difficult scenario to be in. And it made my first experience at the ballot box as a, American annoying. And I felt like this was wrong, that I shouldn't be forced to make this decision. Because if I vote my conscience, it's possible that Carol Hubbard wins. And if I vote to compromise, Bob might lose, even though the majority of people wanted him as well. So I'd have to guess what everyone else is doing. Normally, we kind of like aspire as a country to be, this collaborative project of democracy where people are coming together and the best ideas win in this kind of like marketplace, if you will. And this is not at all what we're doing today. Not even close. As John Mulaney says, I don't know if you've been following the news, but it seems like everyone is mad at everyone all the time. So I'm going to open this up for a quick bit of Q&A. What do you guys think are causing this? Oops. Well, I guess the first one's revealed there. What puts us in this dilemma?
Minority rule.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first one, which is I think broken, the non-proportional representation. What else? What are other things that put us in this situation?
I've read recently, social media is not helping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh God, that would have been a good one. I should have put that on here. Yeah, social media is it's aggravating. All the extremes. It's making the primaries hyper partisan, right? Where both on the right and the left, the topics that are covered in the primaries are so extreme and what like 1% of people on social media are talking about, right? What else is putting us in this dilemma?
So the fact that if someone ever compromises with the other party, they get primaried. The
Right.
extremists in their party look to get them out by putting in someone more extreme.
Right. So you end up with this like plurality system then, where the most extreme person, if they're the loudest, as long as everyone else is split, they still come out on top.
Disinformation.
That's like suppressing turnout and keeping things in the wheelhouse of just for the primaries determine everything. We heard from Janelle that you guys had been working on redistricting a lot. Obviously, gerrymandering is, a big issue that's, causes, whether it's Republicans in Wisconsin or, the Democrats in Illinois, whichever side is in control is going to keep it locked on, bitten down like a bulldog. Any other ideas?
Address, I guess this kind of overlaps things, but the rural-urban divide.
Yeah. That kind of like enforces that polarization, doesn't it? This kind of like us versus them mentality that permeates everything. We also have this issue of like, once people get in, they stay in. We've got, a politics as an industry, a career. It's something, and the thing is, you don't even have to be a politician to kind of like call dibs on your territory. You could even just be a powerful interest that's, captured part of the proceedings. So the challenge here is that changing most of these is kind of not feasible, because whichever side is in power is going to try to keep them that way. But the good news is this isn't actually true for all of these. Specifically, the partisan primaries and plurality voting aspect, the parties in power don't have any incentive to keep them as they are. They're actually agnostic on these two factors. Because whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or even a third party, you kind of hate certain things about these, even if they're keeping you in power currently. Do you think the Wisconsin GOP likes the threat of being primaried by angry Trump supporters right now? No, they're terrified of it. It's a massive sink of all of their time and donor resources. It's just as problematic for those in power as those frustrated by being disenfranchised. And this is kind of creates an interesting opportunity. At this point, I'm going to kick it over to Josh and let him talk about how we could go about fixing this. Let's see.
Cool. Very cool. It's a very good presentation, Kyle. Following the logic. All right. Yeah, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Veterans for Political Innovation and our approach to this problem. Let me try that again, make sure I am sharing the right screen. And very well, I might have been. For my portion, feel free to cut in, feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I'll see them. And if anything comes up, let me know. So can somebody verify that you see my mouse and the Veterans for Political Innovation slides? Okay,
Yep,
cool.
That's right.
Yeah, normally there's a green box around it, but it eludes me. So I briefly spoke with Kyle, and now I've gotten to know him a bit better. Some of you I know. And so let me just start by saying I'm really glad to be here with all of you. I'm happy to talk about Final Five. I'm excited to participate in the political system. I'm a little different than Kyle. I was not and still in many ways don't feel in my heart that I am a political animal, a political person. But slowly but surely I am reconciling that and acknowledging that I am in fact involved in politics. But yeah, I'll tell you all a little bit about me and tell you about Veterans for Political Innovation. So I'm Joshua Wilson. I am from rural Georgia. So like Kyle, I am a Southerner here in Wisconsin. And it is coming up on my first year. I'm looking forward to another summer. That's what y'all call it. It's kind of spring for 3 months, but I'm looking forward to that. And I come from a really rural background. So, you know what? Let me be more direct. I come from an extremely redneck background. So think about The Color Purple, Songs of the South, Uncle Remus Tales, and the very controversial reality TV Honey Boo Boo Family. Those are all things that occur within about a 20-mile radius of where I grew up. And so that means that I grew up in a lot of poverty. And I grew up around a very specific type of Republican demographic on the whole. And it never really occurred to me that there was a liberal or Democrat in existence. I always wondered why I'd see things on the television and they would be referring to the arguments between Democrats and Republicans. And I used to always think, well, where are these Democrats? Do they even exist? And that was probably the only political inclination I had at all until high school. I joined the Marine Corps on my 18th birthday, and there was no opportunity, nowhere to work. So I go to the Marine Corps, and I served 4 years as an enlisted aviation ordnance guy. That means I put 50 caliber big cannons on helicopters, and I put flare and chaff boxes on helicopters, and I put rockets and missiles on the side of them. And that was my job. And I did 2 deployments. I was in Africa and I was in Iraq and at sea. So a very busy 4 years. And then I got out, didn't know what to do, started bartending, went back home, wanted to see mom. I missed home, because I was only 22 and I had missed so many of those late teenage, early adult years. So, and a lot of service members do that. Still not involved in politics, but it may color sort of my experiences for the rest of the story. So then I eventually decide, wow, there's still no opportunity here, and I really want to go to school. So I get into college and I get through it as fast as I can. I'm so glad to have the GI Bill. Never thought I would go to school. And then I'm exposed to, now liberals for the first time and liberal friends, right? Not that everyone in college is liberal, but there's a high density of young people learning liberal ideology in colleges. And so I'm exposed to this. And then immediately I start trying to reconcile what I'm learning from my friends, from my family. And, I'm dealing with it in my own way. And then there's also a mix in the military, a mix of cultures and beliefs and friends, and they're growing. So I'm learning from them as well. And then eventually I go to law school in Atlanta, and then I'm exposed to even a different philosophy where neutrality is emphasized. And I get the privilege of digging into the Constitution and looking at things like the Federalist Papers. And that's really where my political interests start. I started to see how these individuals leaving Britain, starting on a new land, begin to take ideas that had been permeating in the people around them, and they created a government. And it just turned out to be one of the most amazing and experimental democratic governments the world had ever seen. And I started to think about how amazing it is that America is a place that is pretty much founded because we had these rules that provided for representation. Many of the things that Kyle just pointed to are the very things that make the country amazing. So, the founding fathers weren't so myopic. They weren't worried about their particular belief on a gun right or an abortion right like the populace is. They were worried about how the structure works, how the rules work. So my interest in your group, being a part of this, being in Wisconsin, where it's much easier for me to have a narrative and be part of the conversation, frankly, than it was in Georgia, although I love my home, is that there is interest in the rules, just like there was an extraordinary interest in the maps and the ruling with the Supreme Court. And frankly, if I'd have lived here earlier, I'd have loved to help you guys maybe write a brief or do some work and some advocacy in the court. So I'm looking forward to that in the future as well. And then one other part about how I kind of got involved, a friend of mine, so I work at a military veterans charity. I was a public defender for a number of years. I guess I skipped that, but I was working with a friend of mine. He was a National Guard veteran, at my company where I work, which is America's Way Partnership. And he wanted to run. He said, "Can you be my campaign finance manager?" Because I went to business school as well. Skip that too. I'm a busy guy. Anyway, I said, yeah, no, I'd love to do that. And so I did that for him, and I started going door to door. And his platform was simple enough. I'm an independent. The guy you currently have has run unopposed for 15 years. I just want to get, because we were just trying to get him on the ballot. We needed signatures to get him on the ballot. 5% requirement in the state of Georgia to run for a House seat. And I started to realize just how difficult it was if you were an independent. And it's very frustrating, having served the country, served in the military, defended the Constitution, and then had the privilege of being a lawyer to interpret the Constitution, this document being very close to me, right? As a Southerner and a person with a conservative background, you got the Bible and the Constitution, and that's your whole world in terms of your raising. So to sort of see the violence, the agitation, the irritation, polarization, I'm obviously really impacted by it. And so I've been wondering for a number of years, and so going back to my friend who's independent, he wasn't able to get the signatures. And I'm currently working with him to help him file yet another lawsuit, maybe even to the Supreme Court, that recognizes a fundamental right to equal protection of people who are not in parties. So I feel like third parties, independents, and non-favored voters, I mean, they're missing their rights to assembly and equal protection. But I know y'all aren't a jury. I'm not trying to lecture you about that. And I can tell that we're all very like-minded here. I was listening to Kyle's presentation. You wouldn't have been here and stomached this much if you didn't already know that polarization was part of the problem. And so I haven't went through the slides yet, specifically because I really listened to what Bill said. He said, tell your story and be honest. So this is why I'm here and what I'm doing. I think I can help Kyle and help you too by saying that our stories are really important. I said a lot of things, and I mean, not just to liberal family members, but conservative or liberal friends, but conservative family members, both. When I was in law school, I wanted to be the devil's advocate, and people had genuinely sincere, powerful beliefs about whether or not they thought Trump was a good president, or whether they thought the election was rigged, or even little things. I'm reading about abortion, and this is before the most recent development, and I wanted to discuss it. And, as a training attorney, you start to ignore people's buttons and you just push them. And so I feel like I was kind of part of the problem with this polarization that has occurred, because, Kyle's right when he points out the things in our system, but it's also us. The way that we establish relationships, the way that we connect to people, the way we talk about things, whether or not we lend an ear when someone says, I don't want to take a vaccine, or whether or not we lend an ear when someone says, I am woefully supportive of abortion, no matter what, regardless of what the opinion is. I think it's just as important to be mindful of other people's feelings and where they're coming from and meet them where they are. With that being said, Veterans for Political Innovation is aggressively cross-partisan. We've taken up only one issue, that is Final Five voting across the United States. I see Janelle's point about whether or not it's urgent. I can't tell you how urgent you should find this, but important extremely, and so whether you find your urgency, via the level of importance or the amount of time it takes to achieve it is up to you. But I certainly think that this has massive bipartisan movement. Democrats and Republicans are coming to the table, and multiple co-sponsors have sponsored this bill already in this state. And I'm doing a podcast with Veterans for Political Innovation to interview veteran representatives in the state, in Wisconsin, who have supported and co-wrote this bill. And we were going to do a lot of them. I think we're going to start short, but we currently have Tony Kurtz and we have Daniel Reamer. I'm very impressed by both of these representatives. I think I don't know every one of their policies. Like I said, I'm still pretty new here, but I think they're really great people. And I hope that as I meet more of your politicians, I find more good ones. I have met others that I don't like, so I won't name them, but those are the two who are on the podcast. And so, so I'm just going to show you some of these things. These slides are online. They're not even my own personal slides. I have them from the Veterans for Political Innovation website, and I'm happy to share. I see the time. I want to check quickly. All right. Yep. Everybody's here. Cool. So one of the things that we do to ensure that we are cross-partisan is we ground our advocacy in historical context. Now, I believe, and I think I'm speaking for everyone at Veterans for Political Innovation, we believe that veterans are uniquely situated to help sell Final Five voting because we have experienced sacrifice for the greater good, if you will, for the country. And there's various opinions about war and violence, but that's not what's necessarily relevant. The sacrifice itself, regardless of the inherent nature of war. And, one of the things you can point to is George Washington giving up his post when he could have elected to remain president. That act, among a slew of many others, sort of echo in eternity and represent this country's, greatest aspects. And now they're codified in case precedent and statutes and laws. And so George Washington himself was very wary of the two-party system. James Madison and John Adams as well. And there's quotes here you can share if you are advocating for it. But the long and short is they have seen what happens when power is divided between two classes of elites who keep this artificial struggle between the two of them such that they become ineffective. And that is what we're seeing, particularly in Congress. For those who say that this polarization that we're experiencing is something that just happens, during election cycles, this is evidence to show otherwise. These particular graphs from 1949 all the way to 2011 just show how people, when they're surveyed and they identify their issues, how isolated they've become. There's less and less people identifying with issues that are sometimes conservative and sometimes liberal. And that is sort of a recipe for disaster. Some of the real world consequences of polarization that are happening today. And like I said, I take a pause where I think you all seem to agree that polarization is a problem, but I want to cover some of this stuff anyway, because you may want evidence when you're talking with your friends or when you're advocating on, well, how can I prove it? It's what it's all about. The short of this graphic that you're looking at is that Congress is ineffective. Most people agree, but for those that don't, we have a near record low approval rating of 15%. Americans lack confidence not only in the president and Congress, but they also lack confidence in the media. The referral to social media, I think, and media in general is something that more and more people are continuing to feel frustrated by because they don't have a reliable place to go to for their news. The answer to that is a good thing, though. It means we have to start talking again, get our heads out of the computers and off the phones. And I understand this is still a digital platform, but you have to look at people and say, can you help me figure this out? And that's a skill set that many of our youngest members have been denied because many of them haven't been able to practice presenting in class and things due to COVID and stuff. So this is something that all sorts of people, young, middle-aged, old, no matter what it is, that they need people to lead them to come together. And I think what you guys are doing is part of that. I'm glad to be part of that as well. Sort of looking at the politics industry, I'm going to share with you both. I say both, I can only see two faces. I'm going to share to this entire group two of the books that I've been exposed to. This is The Politics Industry. This is the Bible of our founder. I mean, he loves this book and it is fantastic. This book was created by a business owner. I believe she's from Wisconsin or Illinois, but she's from this area of the woods, Catherine Guile. And the famous Harvard professor, Michael Porter, the creator of Porter's Five Forces. In that book, they discuss how politics is no longer competitive. So if you were asked the question, how come we have polarization? That's what Kyle asked. How come it's gridlocked? The answer posed by Catherine Guile and Michael Porter is that it's gridlocked because there is not enough competition. The incentives are to donors, to special interests, to donor dollars. And the competition stakes are that now people struggle, like politicians try to make laws that keep people from voting, or they allow, people to vote that maybe not necessarily live in their area. They struggle over maps. The incentives are at the core of it. So when you think about fair districting, it's very much so directly related to fixing the incentives. And so a ranked system where there are multiple candidates works in virtually every situation. If you are in an extremely red or extremely blue area, you'll have to compete with other people within the party all the way to the general. The money is spread out, the energy is spread out, and it gives better opportunities for independents and third parties. But also, if they are running an election, they have to appeal to their second interest at times. Now, we saw something similar happen in the 2020 presidential election on the Democratic primary, where there was a pretty powerful showing of support for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And they had to kind of cut each other short. Instead of going all the way through the general election to the end, they kind of cut it short to determine that primary winner. This ranked choice open primary system eliminates that. You get to vote for your people all the way to the end, which means they have to appeal to you directly to get your vote, but even to people on the other side. So that whole idea that we'll get more moderates becomes not just more moderates, we'll get people who are more willing to compromise. And that's the goal. Because with compromise comes a more effective Congress. I'm not going to go into great detail. I see it's 7:45, and if I'm not mistaken, that was when we're supposed to be done. So I'm going to wrap this up in just a moment. But I thought I would show you guys, for those who are interested in business, this is the Porter's Five Forces model. In order for a business to be competitive in their industry, they evaluate their competitive rivalry, right? So if you're in the cell phone industry, you're thinking about T-Mobile versus Sprint versus AT&T. There's not a lot of competitors. There's a couple. So that's very low rivalry. And the same thing with Democrats and Republicans. Supplier power. Can the person who gives you the thing that you need, in this case, votes and money, can they stop you? Well, we saw in the most recent presidential election, we don't actually have an estimate on how many people support candidates like Jill Stein, or even back when Ron Paul voted, because the whole thing was you're throwing your vote away if you vote for them. This eliminates that problem because now you can vote for multiple people. And if your third choice wins, you kind of feel like you have a victory, as opposed to it's a hard yes or no. Plurality voting is often referred to as winner take all voting. And that means there's a loser. And when the loser is half the country, you have events like January 6th. You have national dissonance. Cooperation is key, and competitive cooperation is capitalism at its best. So if you look here, buyer power, threat of substitution. Can we substitute? Well, we're trying. We are trying. And if we do this, will we allow new entries? Yes, there will be a much better platform for third parties and independents. And even I was just editing the interview with Representative Tony Kurtz. He said, I may be with the Republicans, but I welcome independents and third parties. They deserve a chance to. So even the politicians that wrote Senate Bill 250 believe that it's necessary that we increase competition for the reasons that Kyle said. This is an election innovation. No worry about, we can revisit these slides soon. But that is to say what we want out of SB 250 are these three things. Open primary, so you can get on that ballot and you don't have to declare whose party you're on. Ranked choice voting, so people can pick multiple candidates and have more options and have their preference definitively stated without ambiguity. And then instant runoffs to make our system more efficient, quicker running, and less toxic. So that's sort of a little bit about Veterans for Political Innovation are sort of one mission, aggressively cross-partisan, and why I'm doing it. Feel free to put any questions in the chat box, but I am done. I'll pass it over. Janelle, I think it was you that were up next. I couldn't remember. I can't remember the earlier slide.
Yeah, but I think Kyle has a few closing remarks, maybe. Thank you, Joshua.
That's right. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. To clarify and make sure what Josh articulated was clear, the open primary in Wisconsin, everyone will still be able to declare a party. It's not a like a party-free primary, but it's that all the candidates will be grouped together in one ballot.
Yep.
Which we'll show an example of.
Cool.
So, like Josh alluded to, and I think someone even pointed out earlier, a tiny number of voters vote in the primary, and they control like most of the outcome of most of our political seats. It's like an absolutely absurd percentage. So part of this has to be reforming the primary. So what this is proposing is we'll have a single primary for all the parties. So in this example that Sarah Eskridge, our executive director, likes, if you're voting for what's your favorite Wisconsin sports team across all the sports, everyone is together on one ballot and people vote on who they think will move on to the general election. And that's it. That's the primary. It's extremely simple. It could not be more simple. This is not a new idea at all. Lots of states do this. Famously, Nebraska has done it for years and years and years, and it was very successful for them. And so California and Washington picked it up too. Louisiana does something very similar, and Alaska just adopted it. So we know this works really well, and it's kind of been a mystery that people haven't done it so far, but that's only half the equation. The other half is doing an instant runoff with ranked voting. So under a ranked election, such as under Final Five voting, you're allowed to designate your second choice of who you want to win, and even your third and fourth if you want. So if in our general election we had, say, the Admirals, Brewers, Bucks, Forward, and Packers, and you could say, okay, yeah, the Green Bay Packers are my first choice, but now I can, if I want to, and there's no reason not to, I can say my second choice is the Milwaukee Bucks. If for whatever reason the Packers don't make it, that they're not viable, I want to vote for the Bucks over the other guys. And you could even vote for your third and fourth choice as well. I mean, you vote all five if you want. No reason not to. You can give as much information as you desire. What this means, though, is that you never have that wasted vote. You can always vote for your first choice, and you have a say no matter how the election turns out. You have like that classic one person, one vote, no matter who the race comes down to. So I can vote for Bob Leeper first, Neil Archer second, and Carol Hubbard third. And I don't have to worry about compromising or voting my conscience. You just get to do both, and there's no downside. Instant runoff is not a new idea either. It's increasingly taking off like wildfire across states of all shapes, sizes, political ideologies. Minneapolis, Minnesota has done it for many years now. It's been very successful and well loved by citizens there. But it's taken over in blue states like New York or red states like Utah. Utah loves it. They've had massive success in the last few years. It's been very big in like the Democratic primary in Oregon and the GOP primary in Virginia. This is a uniquely nonpartisan or bipartisan issue. The Libertarian Party has used it for their state offices for many years now. It is simply not a partisan idea. I'm going to shout out Alaska specifically. If you were looking at those maps carefully, Alaska is the one state that already does both. They have beat us to the punch, and they are the first state to do this. And now Wisconsin is hoping that we can be the second, though Nevada and Missouri are right on our tails trying to do it before even we do. The reason we really want both of these specific changes in one law is when you do these two things together, it addresses the downsides of each. So when you have a nonpartisan primary like in Nebraska, you might end up with two candidates from the same party, which is kind of like the point, but it kind of feels weird. And you could still fund like enemy spoilers. And in instant runoff, like the elections like in New York can kind of become a nightmare when you have this New York or Australia style ballot with like 20 candidates and you need like a ruler to fill in the bubbles. And write-ins kind of become just a pain. But if you're doing each of these, they kind of like eliminate the weaknesses of the other. Because if you have a 5-candidate runoff, you always have plenty of options. And then you don't have to worry about like 10 candidates or write-ins because you handled that at the primary. So it's like very elegant and smooth. A lot of the problems you hear of like ranked choice voting in other states, if you do a final fives format, you don't have those problems. That's what's so unique about this proposal. The good news is the progress on this bill is going very well. We actually already had a Senate hearing with unanimous support of registered attendees on December 14th of last year. We're expecting in the next legislative session, because almost no bills have passed in single session, to really push this through and get it on the governor's desk in 2023. We think this is a very realistic timetable. There's an appetite for doing something to affect the gridlock and people's dissatisfaction with the way government is right now that isn't poisonous like every other election issue. We've been doing house parties across Wisconsin, as you guys have heard, that are pretty popular. People like eating stuff. And I'm going to close with what we are looking to do to stay on that path to success, kind of like why we're here talking to you guys. So the most tactical thing is if we can get you guys on the list, if we can get your support that when the time comes and it's time to hit the button to send the letters to the congressman because the bill is ready to pass, they can wake up and have 100 emails from constituents in their inbox. That is what is going to push this bill over the edge. And that is the #1 thing that we're looking to deliver. Otherwise, we're just trying to get general grassroots support and people like knowing and understanding what this is and that it addresses things that they probably are upset about, as well as hosting those house parties. Because if everyone hosts a house party and all those people host a house party and so forth, suddenly the entire state of Wisconsin is eating pies and doing final five voting. But just as important as these tactical things that will get us to where we need to be are the things that won't get us there. So the biggest thing is partisan campaigning. The #1 thing that would sink this in Wisconsin is if it becomes a red versus blue partisan issue. So if I go out there with my redistricting sign and I am waving it next to my final five sign, that is bad. That is getting us farther away from any hope of a GOP legislature passing this bill. Does that make sense? Like this is kind of a mode switch, a gear shift from operating in like the redistricting space or any other of these partisan fights. Because ideally, this is not a fight. This is like a bridge, and it's like a different mentality, and we have to present it differently to everyone from legislators to individual people on the street. And
Awesome.
This is key.
Thanks, Kyle. I think we're on the right track
Okay.
with our Bridge the Divide name, but I think we need to wrap it up here. I don't know how much, do you have much more?
That's it. I was just going to
Okay.
close with the anecdote that a few dozen people can make a difference. Because going back to 2006, Bob Leeple did win that election by a couple dozen votes. But if things had been just slightly different, if he had been a 4-term incumbent, he wouldn't have had a prayer. So I know we had some not good news both recently and for redistricting and talking about Josh's independent candidate, but there is hope that that it can work. All right, back to you, Janelle.
Super. Thank you so much, Kyle and Josh. Really, really appreciate it. It's really great perspectives. And if you're willing to send me your presentations or just a link to it, I'll put that in the follow-up email that I'll send out tomorrow so that folks can really, I know there was a lot more information there that we didn't cover all the details. So really great to be able to do that. I think we have time for one question. Does anyone have a question for Joshua or Kyle they'd like to get answered?
Is there, I understand, having talked to Jeff Smith from the 23rd Senate District, that there is bipartisan with Kuyenga from the area I grew up in. that this is introduced to ranked choice voting. I talked to him just less than a week ago. Also that Dale Kuyanga doesn't care about this at all, but apparently had a gerrymandered situation. I wonder if you could address what that is. I understand that Kuyanga is not running again for re-election.
Yes, he
Or-
just. Mhm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Kyle, you can tell, I can tell you a little bit about what I know. I don't know much about that particular issue, but Kuyanga being one of the key sponsors on the bill, I reached out to him so that we could do the podcast, and he did inform me that he is not running for re-election, that he is focusing on a nonprofit to serve children in his community, which I thought was cool. I don't know much about the political backdrop though, so I'll hand that to Kyle, but I thought I'd share what I do know.
Thank you.
Well, right. I don't have any inside scoop on that either. I know most of us involved in this effort are saddened by him stepping away, because he was one of the initial sponsors and really got the ball rolling. But the ball is rolling. That's how balls work when they're not going uphill. So that's one of the benefits of this being that nonpartisan. It's not pushing the ball up the hill. It's just going.
Yeah, and I think maybe if I read a little bit more into that too, like into your question, Barb, do we, maybe Bob, you have this too, or Kyle, do you have a list of all the folks that sponsored the bills the first time around, or anyone that's registered support? You do, Bob? So, yeah.
So there were 15 Democrats and 7 Republicans. And I don't know if it was Barb that said that, observed that Dale Kuyanga is not running. That is true. There's unprecedented turnover, people that are stepping down in this year's elections. I can't guarantee it, but I don't believe there's going to be difficulty getting multiple sponsors in both parties, just given how many they already had. 15 Democrats and 7 Republicans. That's almost unheard of nowadays.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you. Great. Awesome questions. Good. Well, we're all going to be learning a lot more about this in the coming months. So I feel like Joshua and Kyle, you've set us on a really, really great track. So thank you very much for being here with us tonight. Really appreciate it. And hopefully our paths will be crossing many, many more times in the months to come. So yeah, big round of applause. And I'm going to, now I can share my screen so you get to see a few of my slides, although they're not they weren't my best slides. My best slides I felt like were at the beginning, but all right, here we go. Oh, now my computer's acting funny, so this is strange. Slideshow, there we go. So as you heard, I love that Kyle used the word bridge, because that's the word that we ended up using for our new project name, Bridge the Divide. This isn't finalized yet. The leadership team is still fine-tuning everything, but we wanted to give you a sneak peek because there are some things that will definitely be in our plan, and some of them that Kyle even mentioned that are in parallel with Voters First Wisconsin. So I'm not going to share this video. I'll put this in the follow-up if anyone hasn't watched a video yet about how the votes get tallied, like how the ranked choice voting actually works. Check that out in the follow-up email. It's just 2 minutes and it's super helpful. But I'll let Anne take it from here.
Okay, Janelle, thanks. Maybe just go to the next slide. It's essentially the same thing, but a little bit more visual. So again, I'm part of the leadership team. There are other members of the leadership team on the Zoom here. And these are preliminary ideas or tactics, and everybody is going to be welcome to help participate in our new effort. There will be plenty of work for all. So we have started talking about how we are going to grow this movement with several different kinds of activities, starting this summer, going through and paying attention to the August primary, this November election, perhaps next winter in the new legislative session when this bill might show up again, and certainly in the 2023 elections. So our timeline goes all the way through at least probably 2023, November. We're talking about, because education of the public is important, starting with speakers around the area, our 7-county Western Wisconsin area, people who can speak on this topic and let people know what we are hoping to do, what Final Five is, what ranked choice voting is, and get some energy around that. We are going to work on house parties, which are a wonderful way to include people, and Bob is going to talk about those. We do want some ranked choice activities, probably at public events like county fairs or community events. We haven't quite figured out what we can do that would work really well and easily at those events, but we want to reach a broad section of the communities around and people around the area. And we are going to culminate, we hope, with a lobby day, which could be in person, could be on Zoom. It could be the phone call storm that is being planned. We're not sure, but we want to reach out to our legislators directly with a final push for approval of this bill. Again, these are sort of our general plans. Things will be finalized and tweaked and looked at carefully, and we will be inviting everyone to help us participate in this. And I think that's it.
And
But Bob, Maureen, Grace, if you've got more to add, please do.
I can tell you a little bit about a house party we had a few days ago. So in addition to my work with what was previously Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voters, I contacted Voters First Wisconsin. I liked what they were doing. And at the time that I contacted them, I didn't know that our effort would be on Final Five voting. I was a big fan of this. So I worked with them. They have a good process, a well-described process. They led me through every step of the way. So I had a house party. And I did this by inviting all the neighbors in my cul-de-sac. I invited 13 households. I had hoped to get about 6 households to attend. I got 3, and Josh attended from Voters or Veterans for Political Innovation. Bill attended with his 2 sons, and to see how this was going for PC Grow. It is based on this book by Catherine Gell, The Politics Industry. So they are, one of the things I liked is they are good at presentation, something that I'm not quite as good at. So I just followed their plans. And you can see in that middle picture, we had what I thought were very professional looking signs and equipment to have this election there, showing off 5 pizzas that were that is what we were ranking. So this was the demonstration. You can see the ballot on the right there. I had sent out a list of 10 pizzas for my neighbors to choose. They replied, and the top 5 are what we got. We had these pizzas there. People tasted 1 or more of them, and then they ranked them 1 through 5. The actual ranking is just to having people fill out that ballot one time eliminates a lot of questions. Janelle, go on to the next slide, please. So then on the left, you can see a little bit. People are evaluating these. They're taking up multiple pieces of pizza, and it is a fun event. You are literally sitting down, having a dinner with your neighbors. If there's any way to break through partisan barriers, having a meal with someone is it. You can see in the middle picture at the bottom, people are just sitting in a very comfortable atmosphere, chatting, and they've either filled out their scorecards or they will be shortly. And then we move to a presentation style. In the upper middle there, I was presenting a slideshow that was provided to me from Voters First Wisconsin. I had my neighbors in the living room. Great participation, a lot of questions, including from a couple of people, asking repeated questions, so you could tell they were interested. And in the bottom right there, Bill is taking the picture. You can see several of my neighbors. Two of the women in there volunteered to take part in what is a key part of this. They signed pre-printed cards that they would participate in a telephone blitz sometime in the next session. So let's assume that's going to be sometime in Q1 2023. Two of the women in my neighborhood will do that. And then one of the men in the background there, you can see him next to Josh. So my neighbor Hans, he said that he will help sponsor another house party. And that's key, because what we want is this to propagate every single house party. If we can get one or two more people to sponsor house parties, the way I say it is, I would love to spend my summer going to 50 house parties, just presenting this same presentation and getting dozens of people at a time in a friendly atmosphere, and then having them be ambassadors for this and participate in that phone blitz. I'll leave it at that, Janelle. If there are any questions, I can respond to them. Otherwise, I know we're a little pressed for time.
Any questions about the house party? No, sounds like fun. Cool. I'm excited. So what's next? I want to share with you North Shore Fair Maps meeting in case you want to hear more about the new maps. It's on Monday and you can register. And if you've gone before, you'll get the link automatically. And then just stay tuned. We'll have a kickoff event like Anne mentioned with a speaker, and then we will launch the house party efforts. So stay tuned, start to think about who you might invite at your house party, what you want to rank. And next monthly meeting will be on June 2nd, same time. Bob?
Yeah, Janelle, I love the pitch you make for house party host. Remember, if you are the house party host, that does not commit you to the public speaking activity. We would be able to provide people to do the speaking there. So, and I know for some people that would be a barrier, but don't let that interfere with your desire to help in that. Thanks
for the clarification. Yeah, and before we launch the house party effort, we'll definitely have a lot of trainings and materials. Like it'll be really clear what we're asking people to do. So yeah, perfect. So this is our new name, Bridge the Divide. So I invite all of you to take yourselves off of mute. And we wouldn't have been able to do this with our old name because it would have been a terrible mess because there were like 18 syllables or something in that name. But because we have this new name that's so nice, we can do this. So we're going to chant this together. I'll count to 3 and then we'll all say Bridge the Divide together, and then we'll just sign off and be done for the evening. So thank you so much for being here. Joshua, Kyle, really appreciate your presentations, and thank you everyone for coming. So on the count of 3, we'll say this together. So 1, 2, 3. Bridge the Divide. Woo-hoo! All right, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Janelle.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye.